All right, so today is February 20th. This is our OLM and operator SDK upstream working group meeting. We've got 3 items on the agenda, and we adhere to the code of conduct, so please be nice to everyone. Jordan says he might be late, so let's skip that topic and we'll move on to Kevin's topic. Kevin, you ready?
Just really quick, we haven't had an OLM release since October. So does anybody have any objections to doing that? If not, I can start the process. I just wanted to know if there's anything in flight or that we're trying to merge that would prevent us from doing a release right now. Okay,
Nothing.
well, then I guess we can just go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Yep. Let me I'll say that
There's only 3 outstanding PRs. So I don't think there is anything critical.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Next up, Yanni, we've got OLMV0 always deploys in CRD. Can we make it optional?
Yeah, and the reason I ask is we ran into this problem with a Postgres operator. So what happened is that the Postgres operator recently upgraded to include a new required fields in the CRD. So we have product that bundle the previous version of the operator. So we have other product that bundling the newer version. So if product A, so for example, if product B bundled operator, for example, 1.1 version that has the CID update with the new field, it get deployed to the cluster first, and then product A later on is deployed to the same cluster, and product A bundles the operator, say version 1.0 that does not have these new fields in the CRD, then the deployment of product A will actually cause the CRD to be refreshed. So the old CRD will be deploy and overrides the new CRD. So that make the product B's CR to not valid anymore. So that would affect the product B. That would break the product B. So the question is, the observation is that it seems OLM V0 that we are using today always deploy the CRD in the operator bundle. So is it possible that we can make it optional, or maybe check if there's a newer version of the CRD exists on the cluster, then do not override it. Because the operator usually will maintain the dev compatibility in the CRD, but it may not be forward compatible. The CRD may add the new field. The new field may be required. If the new field is required, then the deployment of the old CRD will not have those new fields, and it will break the new CRs, the CRs that's based upon the new CRDs.
To make sure I'm understanding, you've got 2 different versions of the Postgres operator that you're trying to install in the cluster. They have different CRDs in them. The newer one has a required field that the older one doesn't.
Right, right.
And if you install the newer one first and then install the older one, then OLM will update the CRD to use the older one's CRD version, like CRD.
Yes, that's observation. Yeah, when you deploy the product with the old operator, then once it creates a CR, you can see that the CID actually is overwritten with the older version.
Is there a problem where it seems like you're going to have a problem regardless, right? If you keep the new CRD that has the new required field, the old controller won't know about it, and anytime it tries to interact with that API without setting the required field, it's going to fail. So it seems like you just have incompatible versions of the Postgres operator trying to run at the same time. Which like will never, like you basically, because APIs are global, right? You have to have the same API in use across all of them. If the controllers are not compatible with that same API, things will break. Yeah, Frederick.
Unless making it, if the field is optional, if the new field is optional, at least we can maintain the
Your
backward
problems, you might still have problems. Like if the new field is optional and the old controller is deserializing information from etcd into its old view of what the structs look like, and then doing an update call, you might lose, like the old controller might drop data when it sends an update. So it's not necessarily sufficient to only add new optional fields.
So yeah, it's not a new problem. Just wondering if community have any suggestion to at least minimize the problem, or any recommendation how to handle it.
Frederick,
Because yeah, it's in the reality, you know, the product can bundle different version of the operator, and the operator can coexist in the same cluster.
Yeah, so when you add a new field to the CRD, so making it optional is the right approach. But so what Joe mentioned, it depends on what the clients are doing. If the clients for the CRD do the things correctly, so that they don't try to override an existing value, but apply only changes, then that would be safe. But obviously, if they try to override, if the old client is trying to override the things that have been already set, then it would be an issue. But to come back to the original statement, Joe, I would expect if we have two different versions of CRD, that an older version wouldn't be applied on top of a newer version without at least a warning or a blessing. It seems a bit risky. I mean, not what a user may expect.
yeah, I'm actually not sure what the logic is. And maybe someone else here knows, but my impression was always that it is order dependent, and there's no comparison of versions to decide whether to keep with what's on the cluster versus take what's in the bundle that's being installed. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if that's intentional. You've also got the same problem if there's like two different packages that want to have the same CRD. And my impression is that the logic is basically, I'm installing a new CRD right now. Let me see if there's an existing CRD and run my CRD upgrade checks for it. And if they pass, then I'm going to apply the new CRD. And even like quote unquote new, like it's just the one I'm applying now versus the one that's already on the cluster, right? So I don't think there's any like version awareness of the bundle that provides the CRD.
No, the only thing that install context is aware of is the version that it's applying and what CRs are on the cluster.
Which actually, yeah. And so I think if you tried to install this in reverse, like if you installed the older version and then tried to upgrade or install a different, or install something separately for the new version, it would fail because you're adding a new required field, and that would mean it would invalidate existing CRs. Or yeah, it would render them invalid. You couldn't interact, you couldn't update them anymore. Or at least the old client couldn't. So I don't think there's really anything OLM v0 would be able to do because this is fundamentally running up against the Kubernetes global API system.
Mhm.
It seems like yeah, it seems like you can't
I
have
mean-
both of these.
I mean, if your packages are the things that are installing these CRDs, maybe you could have structured requirements about what versions can and can't be installed, right? Like, I don't think that there's a way for OLM to do install resolution because everything installs in the context of a namespace. But it's possible with the operator conditions API to prevent further upgrades, right? So in theory, you could just use that to gate certain versions, maybe. I don't know. We haven't really like designed anything around this. I think we'd have to think about the problem a little bit, but I imagine that if you're versioning your CRD in a way where as you add these new fields and there is a incompatibility, that building stuff that understands those boundaries would at least tell users, hey, don't do this.
Mhm.
Am I confusing something or imagining it? But I think OLM v0 has a mechanism to prevent CRD conflicts, doesn't it? I think we do not allow same CRD to be installed twice in OLM v0, or do we?
You're allowed to install packages that provide the same CRD, provided that the second package that gets installed doesn't invalidate anything with the first package's CRs, and they're not watching overlapping namespaces.
All right, got it.
So I think the answer to this question is like, regardless of whether it makes sense to do it or not, if we did make CRD install optional, it still wouldn't solve the problem, most likely, unless you were like super careful with your old clients, making sure that the old clients were forward compatible with the new CRDs, right? Like the whole issue with issuing updates, like if the old client doesn't know about the new fields and it says, put this new object for this instance, that old field is not present, and also it'll fail validation because the CRD says it's required. Or, well, I guess in this case, it would not say it's required, so it would go through, but then the field would be lost.
Yeah, for the old client, probably it's just not going to use the new field need to be aware of the new field. The problem I think we may run into with this CRD compatibility issue is that the end user would not know the difference, and would suddenly find out that the old version that can run in the other cluster will not be able to run successfully on this cluster anymore, and there's no indication, like, what the actual problem is. So for the version in the CRD, it sounds like a lot of time people just update the existing CRD with additional field in the same version, but and that's probably why we're seeing the problem.
So in theory,
I don't-
that shouldn't work if they add new required fields to the same version. Like that would result in general, that would result in OLM saying like, you can't do this. You're adding a new required field. That's a breaking change. You're going to invalidate your existing stored data.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
usually the way that you would add a required field is you would have to make a new version in your CRD and put it there. And then your clients, it gets complicated with CRD conversion, but in theory, then your clients can interact with the API that they know. So that would be an option here, I guess, right? Well, that still doesn't solve the problem of if you install the new and then the old CRD wins.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is like, I don't know if like OLM doesn't really have that concept. Like it just doesn't know what the intent is and what's new and what's old. Like there is no higher version of the CRD. Maybe that would be possible with the same package because you could compare SymVer of the packages within or of the bundles within the package. But there are other cases where two different packages can provide the same CRD. Their versioning is going to be completely different and you can't really compare one to the other. So this, I mean, really this is butting up against one of the reasons that an OLM v1 we're going to basically say like this is an anti-pattern and it causes all these problems that you're sort of highlighting here. And we're going to solve that in v1 by basically not allowing two different bundles to own the CRD.
Yeah, I think that's a good direction. But I'm wondering, even for the same bundle, can we do something to reduce at least reduce the problem? I heard that like in a Helm, you can choose what you want to deploy. You can choose not to deploy the CRDs. But with OLM, because it's part of the operator bundle, so there's no option like you can not deploy the CRD.
Like I said, like that might be possible, but in this particular case, it seems like you'll just run into the very next problem of the old client not doing the right thing, and like that'll break, right? So it's broader than just please don't update the CRD, because then the very next problem you'll run into with the way that clients serialize data. So I mean, honestly, I think the solution here would be ask the authors of the Postgres operator to create a separate CRD bundle and then set up the compatibility such that they dictate essentially which versions of their controllers work with that version of the CRD. And then you would have to stick to the bounds of that. But then at least like you'd have a lot more, like the intent would be more clear of like what's supported with what.
Mm.
I think with OLMV0, when CRDs and controllers are bundled, you have no guarantee whatsoever that a controller that's bundled in one bundle works with a CRD that's bundled in another. Like there's zero guarantees around that really. I mean, there's a little bit that OLM can do to check at runtime, but like in this case, it doesn't, it's not aware of the fact that a client might start updating stuff that drops fields. You just can't know that. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't have any creative ideas for how to solve this other than to say, go back to the Postgres operator authors and see if they have any ideas. And the suggestion I would have is make a separate CRD bundle and have them build the relationships that enforce which versions of the controller can be installed at the same time.
Mm. Okay. Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yep. Okay, that's the end of our agenda.
Jordan's here now. Do we want to go back to the top?
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. I didn't know if anybody had gotten to a really super cool answer for this problem, and I wasn't sure how to do it organizationally. So the problem here is that we're looking at CodeCov action now wants to have only token-based uploading, whereas previously would support a tokenless uploading model. And we're getting a lot of dependabot bumps attempting to go to the action version 4. It looks like there's a free to open source approach here, but it wasn't visible to me when I looked with my account. So I wasn't sure how to prosecute that. And then I also wasn't sure if there was like a policy, a CNCF provision to facilitate this. I didn't know how we should go about it.
My guess is that there's nothing in the CNCF realm that would directly help us solve this. I would assume that someone has permission in the OF and the CodeCov.io operator framework settings to be able to do stuff. I don't know if I do or not.
Yeah, I have enough permissions to set it up, but their front page says, you know, hey, always free to open source projects. But I couldn't actually connect the dots there. I can dig some more on it. I just was kind of hoping somebody would go, oh, hey, this is how we handle this kind of problem.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything established for this kind of thing.
Cool. I'll take an action to dig.
So Jordan, the token-based uploading, is that like a token we need to get from CodeCov, or is it like use your GitHub token?
Yes.
Okay.
No, we got to get it, and we'll want to put it on every one of our managed repos when we do this. So there'll be a coordination phase that has to be managed here too, but more specifically unclear was who's the single source of truth for the tokens for all of these managed repositories, as opposed to, you know, hey, I can go do it. And if we don't have an answer for that, then I can do some more digging.
A couple follow-ups. Do you know if the token is like per project, per GitHub org, per GitHub repo? Have you gotten that far yet?
So yeah, I looked into it, and it's per org.
Okay.
And the way that we're currently set up, our org is considered to be single user for each one of us. Right now, Mikolai and I are the only ones who've quote unquote activated a repository, or a user rather, who uses repositories. And so what we're presented with is, hey, you're on the developer trial, it's expired, so we're bumping you out to the free single user.
Yeah.
So yes, we could go forward and I could get tokens and I could do the PRs to put all the tokens on all the repos that we manage, and then we could bump all the actions and everything be totally copacetic, until I forget to renew a token or somebody is unclear on the process and doesn't know to reach out to me because the token is expired or whatever.
Yeah. One other thing that comes to mind here is I think there are like org secrets in GitHub. So in theory, and if I'm remembering this right, we can go get our token, put it in one place on the entire GitHub org, and then all of the other projects can reference that same org secret. We don't have to copy it around everywhere.
Oh, that would be a delightfully optimized solution for this. I can poke at that, but while I'm trying to find out how do we connect with this open source licensing model for them.
Yeah, okay. Let me know. You likely have to be an org admin to set some of that stuff up. And I know at least I'm an org admin. I assume some others are too, but if you need help, you can ping me.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I could just let you handle this, but I figured that you probably have your hands full, so I can run this one down to ground at least.
Okay, yeah, just pull me in whenever you get stuck or something, and I can try to poke my head in.
Roger, Roger.
Jordan, I know that a lot of companies who provide open source licenses, they normally do not give an option to select open source license from the interface, from the UI, and you would normally need to contact their sales or whatever is the responsible person for that. So you will probably have to do that. So yeah, be prepared.
Yeah, that was my fear, and I was kind of like, somebody was going to pop up a hand and say, "Hey, we already have a coordinated way that we handle this, and we can reach out to them." But we can
Another
stay out of
alternative.
parties.
Yeah, let me poke around too. I feel like there's sometimes some of these sites like have their own heuristic for what they decide are going to be open source, and then it's sort of available because they know your project and looked it up on GitHub or something. So it might be that depending on what permission you have to the CodeCov operator framework configuration, like you may or may not see it. But so I'll take a look too, and I'll let you know if I see anything interesting.
Yeah, and I was just trying to log in again this morning because they have a login via GitHub to the CodeCov IO site, and I was figuring that was exactly the mechanism that they were using to exploit or to interrogate what your relationship is, but now it's throwing errors, so we'll have to do that offline.
Another alternative is to use something else, like Coveralls or some other service. But last time I looked, I think the CodeCov was the only place which allowed merging coverage from multiple jobs. So, for example, in operator controller, maybe in some other repos as well, we have tests from unit tests and E2E jobs combined into a single reporting by two separate uploads. So basically, CodeCov does the merging for us. We say expect two uploads from us and combine it. So maybe we can just look into alternatives, and maybe someone already doing this with some other companies. Also, maybe a little bit of background will be helpful. So I think we added CodeCov about a year ago or so, maybe a little bit less. Initially, we used them use the free version. There was no open source license, I believe, if I remember correctly. It worked fine for some time, but then we started seeing issues with uploads where builds would fail to upload due to rate limiting for GitHub or something like that. And the solution was to start using tokens. I think we decided as a group against using tokens for some reason. I think there was a concern that tokens could leak through the jobs, and someone could potentially upload coverage which is not correct. So probably the worst thing which can happen is that someone impersonates with our token and uploads false coverage to CodeCov, which is not a tragedy, but still something we wanted to avoid. So we ended up marking step for cut coverage as optional. So we now have some jobs failing to upload, but it does not block RCI when it initially did. And now they are there is this change which requires tokens, and it is no longer possible to upload without a token. So we need to find a solution for that. So yeah, that's a little bit of history on this.
Yeah, I think it's worth sticking with CodeCov for some of those like merging things. So I'm sure there's a way to do this. Let's try to dig into this a little bit. Is there anything that's like gonna break with V3 in the meantime?
Jordan, do I remember correctly that they are no longer working already?
No, I don't think that we have a problem with it. It's just that we were really starting to see a bunch of Dependabot attempts to bump the action version, and you had already recognized, hey, this breaks us in some subtle and not so visible ways, right? So this is just sort of trying to be ahead of the storm. I don't think we actually have a functional failure right now.
I think because our coverage upload steps are optional, RCI is not failing, but the step to upload is failing because there is no token, but it is failing silently. So I think we no longer have coverage support in our repos at the moment. I'm trying to open some PR to just check, but I'm like pretty sure this is the case.
I remember reviewing PRs recently in a couple of different repos yesterday and seeing the CodeCov metrics were coming in. So it appeared to me as if we were still functioning okay. It's just that we're on the threshold of obsolescence.
All right, but yeah, maybe, yeah, I'm looking at one of the jobs and it says, unable to locate build via GitHub Action API, which I think was the sign of issues with tokens, but I might be right. I might be wrong. Yeah, I will take a look offline as well at this.
So a less than definitive answer there for you, Joe. It looks like we may have crossed the Rubicon, at least in some repos at this point.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's not the end of the world, right? If we don't have code coverage, so we can take our time a little bit.
Yep.
All right. Any other subjects or topics or anyone wants to bring up today? All right, I'll take that as a no. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.